Surrealist art is often a pretty tough sell. Even when it attains some level of notoriety or popularity, it's easily brushed off by a mainstream audience as simple non sequitur. Pictures and sounds made to weave the nonsensical together, something which fires off a few synapses for the sake of it, but little else.
My spoon is too big.
But I think surreal art kind of gets the short end of the stick in this regard. And while I agree that it is a type of art that can be difficult to thread the needle with, those who do are often very purposeful, and those who spend their time trying to get to the heart of art like this, I think are necessarily flexible. This is a breeding ground for raw introspective subjectivity, and this is the soil from which some of my favorite pieces of media have grown. Things like Yume Nikki, LSD Dream Emulator, and of course, ENA. ENA, for those of you who don't know, is a web series created by Joel Guerra, or simply Joel G. It is composed of currently 5 main installments, 4 animated shorts on YouTube, as well as an interactive 5th installment, a video game called Dream Barbecue, which at the time of this video's writing just released its first chapter fairly recently. Look, I know it's been several months, mustering the energy to write is hard these days, okay? The series follows the titular character ENA, a strange girl often split both physically and mentally between varying modes, and the often unimaginably strange world she occupies. Given that ENA is a series with a lot of bizarre imagery and often confusing plots, there's been a lot of energy devoted by many to interpreting the meaning of the series, while there are equally as many people who take its strange sense of humor at face value, arguing that there's very little intended meaning in the series, and that it's just weird for weirdness' sake. While I wholeheartedly disagree with the latter, I also think discussions of the former strain can miss the trees for the forest, so to speak, and yes, I say that atypically on purpose. There are doubtlessly many speculations you could make about the wild world ENA occupies, but I think a much more interesting and important question is what all of that set dressing is in service to. What is this world meant to convey, both thematically and emotionally, and how does ENA, as the vessel of all of this strangeness, the interface through which we experience these things, reflect those artistic intentions? Well, spoiler alert, but I'm not exactly Joel G. I can't give you the actual answers from the guy's brain, so my thoughts and feelings are largely just going to be my own. But by the end of the video, I hope to give you what I think to be, at the very least, an interesting perspective, while also hopefully conveying something I think to be pretty essential to ENA's character, which is her adaptability to every viewer's own personal experience. We've got quite a bit of ground to cover, so we'd probably better get going. Here's why ENA is you, and also the other. Before even starting with the textual elements that make ENA who she is as a character, it might be prudent to mention one of her most core aesthetical inspirations. Girl Before a Mirror is one of many famous creations of one Pablo Picasso. Perhaps you've heard of him. Though I would caution you about looking into the painting's subject, one Marie Walter, who was much younger at the time of Picasso's fascination and infidelity with her than you would comfortably hope. Putting that aside to delve into the piece itself, though, it's easy to observe even at a glance where the 1932 piece's stylings could factor into ENA's design. The split bicolor face that depicts seemingly different emotional vibes, the mirror which reflects an even more amorphous darkness perhaps beneath this veneer, whether in discussion of purity and shame, sex or death, or even the simple border between the second and third dimensions, it's clear that duality, and even more so the interpretation of self, is imperative to the mood here, and ENA takes this to an extreme.
Though I feel the gratification of the audience, I can't sense any change in me.
Though we were formally introduced to ENA in a brief animation loop by Joel simply titled ENA on June 4th, 2020, we'd be drawn into her actual world in the first proper episode of the ENA series titled Auction Day, uploaded on May 26th, 2020. One thing we might notice about her right off the bat, aside from her segmented appearance, is how that segmented appearance complements the way she conducts herself. ENA is typically split between 2 primary modes of self-expression, that being her happy self, the yellow side, and a depressed, self-deprecating side, which is blue. Sunny and rainy, to put it very simply. Something which is both coded by color and by presentation. ENA's yellow side speaks in a more traditionally masculine register, while her blue side speaks in a more feminine register.
To be clear,
I find this particular type of delineation, that being the male and female voice, to be somewhat reductive, largely. Voices have a lot of flexibility, not even getting into the binary gendered aspect at play here, but as a metric for some further discussion, especially surrounding how most people would see ENA, it's at least useful as shorthand, if nothing else. We'll return to this subject, though.
Yellow ENA speaks extremely formally and politely, while blue ENA is more prone to emotional outbursts, incoherency, or even going nonverbal when she's extremely distressed. Already you may begin to see some interesting things within her that are worth relating to, but let's save some of those observations for as we get further along. The bulk of Auction Day's runtime is dedicated to just what it sounds like, an auction. The auctioneer running the affair refers to the disillusion of everyone's existential troubles while running it, seeming to imply this distraction is basically just a way to forget about the dread everyone here routinely feels about life. Fitting that ENA would show up to it, even describing it as the most grand of days, despite it being a daily event. There isn't much of a through line to follow here, so I'm not going to labor too much over the beat-by-beat events of the episode, or even any of the others for that matter, but I think one thing that's important to note, aside from the bizarre absurdity of the setting already on full display, is that despite being pretty weird herself, ENA doesn't really seem to fully fit into this place. For one, she's the only character who looks remotely like she does. In fact, many of the characters in the episode are the tombstone-looking guys who are near carbon copies of each other. And when Mooney, her floating moon friend, says something bizarre about the Hourglass dog on sale, ENA expresses immediate confusion.
Dog looks like he has something to say, if you get what I'm saying.
Wait, no. That was very weird. What is wrong with you?
Like, what she says is obviously nonsensical to a degree that it suspends her disbelief in what she's seeing. She doesn't quite fit the mold, something worth keeping in mind as we go forward. I'm also not going to spend too much time arguing over whether there is any meaning to be mined from ENA as a property here, because I find the question to be a non-starter. If you sincerely believe there is no meaning in this, I don't think I'm going to convince you, but I would implore you to reconsider that. For starters, I don't think intent is the end-all be-all to interesting discussions of art, especially when dissecting it. And also, one thing that immediately deters that assumption for me is one simple fact that we see in the credits, the fact that there was a script revisionist. I think for the most part, something meant to be purely nonsensical would be not necessarily impossible, but difficult to do script revision for. After all, you need a revisionist to look at things like structure, pacing, characterization, consistency of intent. Pure randomness for randomness' sake seems, at least for my money, to be better suited to the world of pure improvisation. I'm not an industry buff in this regard, though, so I don't say this with any particularly strong conviction about the process. It's just something that got me thinking, and felt worth tacking on as a small point on this tapestry. The second video in the series, Extinction Party, was uploaded on September 15th, 2020, only 4 months after the previous episode. Funnily enough, I already mentioned LSD Dream Emulator earlier, and this episode in particular was stated by Joel to be inspired by the work of Osamu Sato, the producer and composer of LSD, so made the comparison even more fitting, I suppose. This entry mostly revolves around ENA going through a bizarre maze and trying to locate Mooney. Again, there's not too many things I want to mention here, especially because this one is also pretty short, but it does have a few important things worth noting that will only continue to become more relevant over time. For starters, we see more hints of ENA's sense of not belonging in this place. Most of the people who communicate with her are actively hostile to her presence, telling her to either go away, or in the case of our first new character, Keeper, telling her that her exterior is not up to their community's typical standards. Perhaps somewhat coincidentally, I find it all the more interesting that Keeper resembles a Greek statue, since Greek statues are often gestured toward as ideals, often in tandem with misunderstandings of what those supposed ideals actually represent. When ENA talks to Mercy, we also get the first indication that ENA's name isn't exactly pronounced consistently. Back in Auction Day, Mooney said ENA's name with a clear E sound, ENA. Mercy says ENA, and later on, when ENA meets up with Mooney, she says ENA. I think there are several interesting ways that you could read this, but again, all in due time. Speaking of Mercy, it's interesting to note that while her dialogue may appear at first glance to be quite friendly to ENA, her subtitles are actually pretty misleading, as what she's actually saying in Korean is quite different, demanding to know why ENA's here, threatening to kick her ass if she doesn't leave, and ultimately giving up before telling ENA not to accept anything from anyone in the maze. Interestingly, it actually seems as though ENA can't tell what she's saying, instead responding to the dialogue in her subtitles. Two people literally speaking past each other, or indeed in different languages, more metaphorically as opposed to literally. As if ENA's way of looking at things is incompatible with those around her. When she reaches Mooney, now in her drunken state, she adds to this feeling, once again expressing confusion about everything, calling it weird, and asking if Mooney is even able to say anything that makes sense. Ultimately, she does break out of her funk, saying that she wants to give Mooney a gift, before revealing that Mooney herself is the gift, maybe a way of thanking her for at the very least being a consistent companion when all else seems chaotic and overbearing to her. I find it interesting that even when people on a surface level seem to be helpful to ENA, their intentions are cast in doubt or duplicity. Perhaps a notable contrast to ENA's own two selves, which often vacillate between a politely submissive and cooperative attitude and an active despair of assuming the negative intentions of both the people and world around her and being sure that they will punish her for it. And before I go any further, I want to essentially state my assertion before building up around it. ENA is the platonic ideal of what is essentially a social outcast, someone perceived as outside the cultural or social norm, has strange ways of thinking or viewing things, as well as ways of presenting themselves, someone whose norms are looked down upon, ostracized, or even actively maligned simply for being what they are. But at the same time, I don't think that this is all there is to ENA. After all, as we'll get into, she's an extremely flexible character to viewer insertion, and indeed, the popular trend of ENA OCs made to reflect the creators themselves have been sanctioned by Joel as being canon, which clearly seems to reflect to me a clear intention to make ENA personalized in some way. What does this overlap mean? Well, let's continue examining the text first before we start diving headfirst into everything. Our third video in the series, titled Temptation Stairway, came out on February 15th, 2021, a pretty decent gap between the release of Extinction Party, though not for no reason, seeing as this video is a chunky 17 minutes and 38 seconds long, a massive expansion from the sub 3-minute runtime of Auction Day, and even the 5-minute runtime of Extinction Party. Joel has stated of Temptation Stairway that he considers it to be both the end and the beginning of something, as well as a sort of season finale where the series would go on to take a decidedly different direction afterward. This might be interesting to note if we examine these three videos as a sort of set or template of the series' original vision, and contrast it with how it shifts and changes from here on out. Well, in any case, this is the biggest video by far, so what is the meat all about? Well, this episode centers around ENA being challenged to a race to the top of the Great Runus, a being said to grant wishes by Mooney, who once again adds to the pile of strange ENA pronunciations, opening this episode with, "Hey, Ina." By this point, we can see even she tends to act with disregard to ENA, only responding to her in the midst of her active distress when her words are relevant to Mooney's own goals. You see, ENA doesn't seem to like the crowd very much, and once that crowd begins to converge and box in around her, she goes completely gray and nonverbal, screaming and crying in response while covering her face. To me, this reads especially familiar as someone with autism. It's very easy to read this as overstimulation, and while she does eventually return to her normal state, it takes literally being whacked around by the brick frog for a moment to do this. Yes, a brick frog, don't worry about it. Amidst this panic and desperation, ENA can see many towering piles of mannequins trying and failing to reach the sky as many more fall down, and also receives a turon from a masked merchant. Many people have pointed this out before, but the dance ENA does with the merchant upon receiving it is one from the music video for the song Once in a Lifetime by the band Talking Heads. Considering the Great Runus only appears once in a very long span of time, I can assume this choice is somewhat surface level, simply referring to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But looking at the lyrics proves pretty interesting too. I'll save that for the end of this entry though. Let's keep dissecting the rest for now. When the Great Runus seemingly destabilizes, its mass swirls into a sort of faceless girl wearing a blue dress, going into a large yellow point. Her hairstyle also seems somewhat reminiscent of ENA's own to me, which I find even more interesting when after falling into her, we see a pile of mannequins with the girl's empty face replaced with a black hole. The mannequins themselves take on a really interesting symbolism in this entry in particular, as they seem to be perpetually failing to reach something, whether in their towers, strewn about long stretching fields, or pounding despairingly on the floor of one area in particular. In the first instance, during the crowd scene, we actually get reversed audio of a line from further on from a character named Ulysses, that ENA speaks to where he says, "Desires are never fulfilled nor quenched." In the context it's spoken, he's telling ENA that she's arrived too late to have her wish granted, because the Great Runus' door has already been closed and that, quote, "punishment is imminent." I find it very interesting then that she immediately sinks into a sea of code, which we see something similar to later with an ocean of it going downward. Suspended within this funnel, we see several discarded and broken ENAs, which briefly flicker to look like the mannequins. So is ENA related to the mannequins in some way? Well, this brings us to our next point of interest. Shortly after her talk with Ulysses, ENA arrives in a flower field of faces interacting with the shepherd, who does cooperate with ENA after being given the turon, but is initially quite hostile to her, regarding her as, quote, "another ENA troublemaker." That's pretty weird phrasing for someone you just met, isn't it? But even then, it'd be a weird way to phrase a meeting with someone you know, too. Another ENA troublemaker. This line has become a pretty large point of contention, as a lot of people have taken it as a sign that ENA is not simply a person, but perhaps even a species or genus. It certainly would seem to fall in line with how people seem to recognize and show hostility toward ENA if they're regarding her as part of a disagreeable category. Furthermore, I'd wager to say the mannequins could also have something to do with this. Do all of them have potential to become ENAs of a sort? Do ENAs borrow these mannequin bodies as a way to interface with the world around them? We don't really know this for sure right now, but I do think it is an interesting idea to at least keep in mind, especially with something we'll see later in Dream Barbecue. After receiving a blood ID from the shepherd, not the first time ENA's received a request for a blood sample, mind you, she gives it to an angry orb named Maria and an afroed man named Gabo. By this point, she is visibly frustrated, declaring that they are all, quote, living a lie, before encountering a floating pink dolphin who emerges from something that looks like an ophanim named Findal in the middle of the desert. There is a lot going on in this stretch, so I'm not going to attempt to go into too much detail about it all right this second, as I'd like to address some more minute points in different, more sweeping contexts. For now, let's just focus on briefly going over what happens from here on. After following a strange magic orb to a purple witch-looking person named Vali, ENA is able to enter a door in the upside-down pyramid after the desert sand clears. Inside, she goes through a twisting, square, monochrome hallway before flying through a watery door, falling down through a sequence of code, and then going into a cave. When the stone in the cave rolls away, it reveals a sort of pink, wiry archway surrounded by pillars with doors on them. It appears Mooney's finally arrived, and wasn't satisfied with the results she got from her meeting with Runas. As ENA's body turns mysteriously fully yellow, a figure emerges from inside Mooney as she admits that her wish was to become thinner, after which ENA is shocked and shakes her head disapprovingly. A lot going on in this one, huh? I think it draws into focus pretty successfully what will become a sort of running theme moving forward, though, that being unattainable dreams. ENA ends this entry looking like she may be trying to successfully integrate or unite the disparate parts of herself, perhaps in an attempt to become more unified and servile, agreeable to the world around her that she doesn't quite understand. Clearly, she seems to disapprove of the way these people live. She has a hard time existing in crowds, and one of her most telling lines is when she's chatting with Findal, where she exclaims,
Why is anyone punching me so softly today?
Quit the hitting and finish the job!
Notably, she ends this sentence, the more negative part of it, with her sunny side voice, and this occurs quite a bit through Temptation Stairway. Lines that would typically be reserved for one side or the other of ENA's personality often seem to switch up, blurring that line between herselves even further. Perhaps this shows a desire to become whole or accepted, but as Ulysses so eloquently put it before, desires are never fulfilled nor quenched. And of course, obviously, Ulysses' name seems to be lifted from the famous given name, perhaps most well known for its use as the title of the book by Irish writer James Joyce. We don't really have the time to get into, all of that, but to put it near extremely simplistically, Ulysses is a book which delights in the process of making the mundane grand, sort of emphasizing the weight we assign to our everyday lives, which are, in the grand scheme of things, very fleeting. It seems only fitting to posit, in that manner, that life is spent trying to satiate grander desires which can often never really be staved completely off, only worked with. Keep that in your back pocket for later. This isn't even to mention some of this entry's more evocative environmental storytelling as well. The oceans of code are one thing, very compellingly blunt about the potential of this world as a setting, but there's also the disconnected stairways, planes of empty hourglasses, doors shaped like menacing cats with open maws, and archways shaped like praying hands. Dozens of possible doors, exits secluded on lone pillars that cannot be reached. And of course the wall with a marking which, when turned into a data matrix, reads, "Forget your past," sitting right outside the room with all the wailing mannequins. Clearly, this is not a place full of happy people and those who pretend they are. Perhaps it'd be more accurate to say they're living a lie, like ENA so boldly claims. Is she really the weird one here, or is she the only one who can see the writing on the wall, so to speak? Was this place an escape for her, an attempt to become happy as herself, or is it the opposite, inhospitable, incompatible, and isolating? Remember how I said it might actually be a good idea to check the lyrics of that Talking Heads song? Yeah, well, this is where I wanted to do that. Let me read it for you. Living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground. Into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. The song itself gets at a very specific point, which I find to be oddly relevant here. It makes the point that many people drift near unconsciously through life, expecting to reach some kind of ideal, but either they don't and they resent it, or they do and did nothing to achieve it. In either case, when the crawl of time comes knocking, they find themselves unfulfilled, unidentifiable, and return to the water, to a dream, to chase something that they were told they could have, but have never actually found. Thinking maybe, just maybe, if they keep clawing further under the dirt, they'll find what they actually need. But those desires are never fulfilled nor quenched, remember? To a world as indifferent to your presence as this, you may as well just be a crying, faceless mannequin stirring up trouble by insisting you belong. Your past doesn't matter because unless you can conform to what seems unfathomable, you have no future to speak of. Struggle to become uniform, struggle to become whole, but you have a crack in you. It's never easy to grant a wish. So if you can't make it, can you try to fake it? That is exactly the question seemingly posed by the next entry in the series, that being the fourth major episode, Power of Potluck. It clocks around 7 to 8 minutes shorter in runtime than Temptation Stairway, and was released on November 28th, 2023, a whole 2 years and 9 months later. Of course, this was probably only to be expected, as Dream Barbecue had already entered development between these points, first being announced with a teaser on March 25th, 2021, given a proper announcement trailer on September 22nd of that year, and then being given a full trailer on January 27th, 2023. We'll get to all of that stuff when we get to Dream Barbecue proper, but for now it'd be good to know that by October of 2023, the game had been announced to be facing a delay, as the team wanted more time to polish it to their vision, probably accounting for the fact that it is now a chapter-based release as well. Making games takes a heck of a lot of time, especially when it's essentially an interactive version of what we've gotten so far. So what is Power of Potluck exactly? Is it a filler episode meant to slot into the gap so we could hold out a bit longer for Dream Barbecue? Well, sort of, maybe, but not quite. This one certainly seems to have the least amount of details out there surrounding its production and overall purpose, but I think it actually acts as perhaps even more of a perfect endcapper to this era of ENA than even its predecessor did, and I think we'll finally be able to draw a lot more into focus and talk about it for a bit once we have it squared away. This episode takes the form of a series of acts in a play, often shown in a sort of isometric perspective. ENA is back to being split between yellow and blue, but unlike before, her blue self is actually quite happy-seeming. Seeming being the operative word. This blue side is a floating mask which is attached to her, and though ENA guides its trajectory at first, it all too soon begins dragging her along, as she tries to discover, through the acts of this play, what true joy or fun is. From the very start, a rabbit named Ivy tells her that she's lacking when it comes to this. Indeed, the further she goes, the more she struggles to comprehend the concept as it's explained to her. Joy is depicted somewhat ambiguously as a nearly religious experience of connection, a bliss that can only be achieved through the linking of others. A unity likened to the whole universe dancing in harmony. ENA remarks on this, saying that it's a perplexing concept of happiness, wondering if she herself is the one the rhythm can't catch. In the end, she's told that she is the one now required to stand on the stage and perform joy for the sake of an audience, but this is what finally breaks her connection to the mask that she's been wearing. Confronted with a massive face composed of skulls called the Therapist, ENA confesses that she cannot understand this joy, and that in trying to do so, she was only ever confused, upset, and indeed wearing a mask. The Therapist's advice seems only to be that fun cannot be sought out here, and that fun often only makes itself known in smaller, incidental moments, and that ENA need not return here, calling this her resolution. Outside the door, ENA's returned to her reality, where Mooney expresses annoyance that she didn't just ring the bell and run away. A strange creature with a zipper mask unzips its own mouth and reveals what looks like a crying human with its own zipper, stunning ENA, before it's quietly dragged into the square hole on Mooney's body by an emerging arm, as Mooney once again seems not to get why ENA is so confused. I think for a lot of people of varying backgrounds, the idea of performance will ring as oddly poignant. Whether you're someone who struggles with neurodivergency, self-image, or a variety of other things, presentation is always a sticking point which seems to get to us, I think. There's something oddly overwhelming about feeling as though you're forced to contend with an expected image that people want you to perform, while in reality, you find it difficult or even impossible to understand those expectations, or why they would be desirable in the first place. To exist outside the expectations of others is to not be caught in that universal rhythm, and often the only way we can approximate what's expected of us is by wearing a mask. But that mask is just that, a mask. It's not representative of our true feelings, and though we can try our hardest to use it to control our own lives, in the end it will only ever continue to drag us into places we don't want to be. Only in the unplanned and incidental can we find our most authentic selves, and perhaps that's where the truest joy can be found too, even if it is often fleeting. To this point then, I would say the overarching character arc of ENA is one of a person who does not belong or conform to the conventions of their own society, someone who feels alien to the people and places surrounding them, and who, despite desperately struggling to understand those surroundings, is increasingly pressured to forget themselves and accept the way that things are. Unfortunately for ENA though, this struggle for self-acceptance is at direct odds with what the world expects from her. Its residents are outwardly hostile toward her for being who she is, only seeming to value her when she arbitrarily puts her own desires to the side for their sake, and the joy of the audience is not necessarily the joy of the performer, because acting is indeed an act. It's difficult to say whether ENA has reached any genuine enlightenment by the end of all of this. Indeed, it's almost guaranteed that she will continue to struggle. But in at least being knowledgeable of her own struggles and the futility of returning to a theater where she is only expected to mimic those she doesn't understand, she might be able to find an acceptance of herself and of her own otherness.
How fun was it inside anyways?
It was pretty stuffy.
And I think that's the unifying element of her character that is meant to be so easily adaptable to the viewer, her otherness. I think to an extent everyone has felt like an outsider because of something, whether it be due to mental illness, traumatic experiences, gender presentation, race, religion, and many other factors, often mixed and matched for many people too, all of which I'd argue are represented at least somewhat in ENA herself, or at the very least the world she inhabits. It can feel both so easy and so disempowering to feel like you're practically speaking a different language from the people around you, or in some cases literally speaking a different language from those around you. To not comprehend how they feel and to struggle with that sense of displacement. And a surrealistic setting to me doesn't just imply a strangeness for strangeness' sake, but a potent visual metaphor for this sense of alienation. To those outside the margins of our society, we're often encouraged to show very little pity or compassion for their struggles. The rules or expectations we face are often so rigorously set and reinforced from our births onward that ostracization is an all but guaranteed punishment for those who toe the line. We, as average people in the human world, are most likely, at least in large part, to recognize what those parameters are, even if we don't fulfill all of them. It can be difficult to develop empathy for people when you're never given a good grasp of what they actually feel on a daily basis. To me, ENA as a series thus far has done a brilliant job at abstractly illustrating that by drawing us into an almost nonsensical world and giving us ENA herself as a focus character. We're being given the opportunity to put ourselves in her shoes, sharing in her alienation by also failing to understand the things that surround her just as she does. If anyone has ever told you with palpable disgust that you should just be normal and you haven't been able to understand what they meant, I think you'll find a sliver of yourself in that polygonal form. But she's not the only one anymore, is she? Right, there is a game to get to, isn't there? Dream Barbecue, which was in development for several years, just had its first chapter, Lonely Door, released not too long ago on March 26, 2025. Though it was initially conceived to be an animation, like the rest of the series, and partway through development it was almost made into one again due to the difficulty of making it into a game, we're finally starting to see the fruits of Joel and his team's labors, and boy am I happy for that. But rather than get into what we've gotten of the game so far right away, I think it might be interesting to at least take a look at what we were given with the game's biggest trailer. A different ENA, a variety of new locations, an altar whose hand-like shadows shift into a gun pointing at her, darkened red skies, different struggling forms, and plenty of mannequins yet again. This to me feels like an even darker strain of what we've been getting since Temptation Stairway, and this new ENA split between the forms of the salesperson and the meanie seems like the quintessential worker, but also reminds me very slightly of a soldier. Chalk it up to parts of her outfit as well as the hail of bullets raining down on her in one of the trailer segments maybe. I have a feeling that guilt will end up playing a big part in the overall vibe of Dream Barbecue, and if there's one thing I can say for certain, it's that guilt is a big component when it comes to things like feelings associated with performance and conformity. I think it's also very interesting that the track that scores this trailer, an incredible track by Oliver Buckland, is titled Anamoya, which means a nostalgia for a time that you've never known, a past you have never lived. A past better forgotten, maybe? Considering ENA's clear webcore aesthetic, it doesn't surprise me that this is a feeling that it may be meant to evoke. So much of the old web is the subject of secondhand nostalgia, especially as the internet only continues to grow more centralized and become more isolating. I'd argue now more than ever, those who increasingly found refuge in niche communities online are being pushed out into a spotlight they do not relish because those communities are slowly being destroyed, a war fought for the soul of the internet that was clearly lost a while ago, while the stragglers try to hang on. That too is a form of alienation. But perhaps we should boot up the game now to get the rest, at least of what we can right now. Chapter 1 has two major paths you can take, which focus heavily on whether you're more or less dedicated to your job. What is that job? Well, in totality, it seems to be locating and getting rid of the boss, but for this chapter, we're tasked with finding a genie, so we can clear the smoke from the big overworld and progress further into it. The genie's presence also seems to be tied directly to the bathroom? More on that in a bit. The path you end up taking can actually diverge quite significantly here. Either you can help ENA fulfill a bunch of tasks in order to get an audience with the genie, or you can take a taxi cab on over to the delightfully overstimulating Purge event, leading ENA to be unable to cross over to the bathroom and therefore unable to find the genie while she is still alive, though her remains offer for ENA to touch her memories, to imagine a reality where she achieves her desires, leading her back to the exact same ending as the other path. It's a real illusion of choice sort of thing, but before we get too into how that ending shakes out, we've got a lot of stuff in between to comment on. If you thought the prior ENA entries were full of interesting symbolism, Dream Barbecue turns things up to 11 with a deluge of compelling illusions, thematic through lines, and even gestures towards its previous entries that it contains. For starters, the beginning area already brings to mind that sort of traumatic post-war imagery that I'd been picking up the vibes of before. The glaring red sky juxtaposed against traditional houses, along with the barren straits and struggling massive form in the sky, bring to mind the remnants of a war-torn land. ENA goes to sleep in the bed and immediately is surrounded by monitors with crossed-out eyes, perhaps a willing blindness. In this starting area, there is a lot of traditional Japanese instrumentation, as well as more of an emphasis on Japanese dialogue than in previous entries, particularly with your business companion, Froggy. As I've already stated though, I don't think these are the only connections to a post-war aesthetic. For one, there's the sort of military-esque outfit that ENA wears, and that scene with the raining bullets I mentioned before. In context, the bullet shower accompanies another instance of someone refusing to communicate with ENA because of who she is, and her arguing,
Guys, wait! I'm not doing what you say I'm doing! I'm not doing anything! I'm not doing anything at all!
It's a striking visual precisely because it invites you to think about what this ENA could have been involved in, and considering that more than a few of the NPCs refer to this land as one beyond death or a sort of afterlife, I think the message is slightly clearer than usual. I think it'd be easy to see these things and come to the conclusion that ENA is in essence the image of someone who was involved in a conflict and blindly marched to the tune of someone else's beat. Someone who may have under pressure, but of their own volition all the same, done some pretty terrible things, and been condemned to some sort of inexplicable purgatory. I mean, it's definitely worth noting that all of the characters who seem to be able to offer some form of salvation or absolution, most often they chastise or outright refuse to do so for ENA. Hell, in one portion of the game we see the most humanoid version of ENA that we ever have, and she literally looks like a zombie, an undead with a gaping wound in her chest from which the more polygonal, almost vector graphics-esque ENA emerges, remarking on how sick and miserable she feels. A hangover is always worse in the afterlife, huh? That's not to even mention the smattering of graves around, or the giant dilating eye in the hub's sky, like someone dying, or the wandering children who seem to aimlessly trudge through their afterlife without rest. Some of them, too, comment on this idea of post-mortem toil, and the ones who seem in any way joyful are hidden away in obscurity, requiring quite a bit of scouring to even find, and they don't talk to you at all. The most interesting bit of characterization for Dream Barbecue ENA that we have so far, though, is in my mind, her single-minded fixation on labor. And to be clear, this isn't even to imply that ENA likes many of the jobs that she does. She'll openly deride them as being loathsome on more than one occasion, but often also questions what else she could possibly do. It's as if she believes her purpose is to do labor, that there's some greater good that her suffering and compliance accomplishes, which is largely non-negotiable. In the questline for the taxi driver, where you're able to recover the driver's heads and restore him, the whole idea is proposed to ENA through the lens of restoring a man to his job position, as the proposed thought of him being denied his ability to labor is practically blasphemy to her. She's visibly shocked and offended that he'd be kept from doing his duty. Pursuing all of the available job options for ENA leads you to acquiring the human board, a face that you can plant in the ground to grow a man? Look, I said this was a weird series. And climb across them to higher or adjacent areas. I guess you could make a point about trampling over people here, though. Either way, if you arrive at your intended destination, you're still consumed and corrupted, taken to a genie who refuses to absolve you, while the fixtures of the bathroom interrogate you. A mirror to reflect on the past and future, a sink to wash sin off the face, a fountain of smoke to collect lies, a place to deposit aspirations. Ultimately, though, while the genie will accept one of ENA's aspirations, it is only the immediately possible, the clearing of the smoke. Asking for anything more, including a blissful life or eternal happiness, is supposedly out of ENA's grasp. A worker is nothing more than a cog in a great machine, and aspiring to individual happiness is out of the question. On the path where ENA forgoes her duties and ends up attending the Purge event, she literally becomes more gradually corrupted the longer she strays from the path of her job. Roots and tree branches string up her individual pieces, slowly twisting her and making it more difficult for her to move or speak. It's almost as if she's having withdrawal symptoms and becoming increasingly agitated as a result. She may not care about her job, but not doing it isn't an option.
Listen to me! Regrettably, I'm very hardworking, and I shouldn't be in a place full of morons having fun!
It's the same way I think a lot of us who are outside of a general societal mold feel when forced to interface with the society that really isn't built to accommodate us. We're told so often to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, make something of ourselves to earn a place and a means to live, but what if you're different? What if your differences make that process a struggle? Labor is so often not accommodating to these people, and though it will insist upon itself in coldly pragmatic terms, it is in its indecision, its inability to acknowledge and reward those it deems incompatible with the ability to live regardless, quietly turning away and asking those people to die. Because sooner them than a system, a machine that champions itself at the expense of thousands anyway. Whether it is the industry or the industrial complex, the result is rather simple. Your bones make up the foundation, and when they break, a replacement will be found. I think there's also something to be said about being marginalized in systems like this, and how that couples with the themes and overall implications about this version of ENA that I've already discussed. I think you could really draw some potent parallels between ENA as a guilt-ridden soldier figure with the way many of us are made to feel in societies which thrive on marginalization. We, as social outcasts, already have reasons to decry our own oppression, but by virtue of existing in the society that we do, some of us even paying taxes to a government that very pointedly works against both people in our own communities and other vulnerable people abroad, there's no escaping this sort of Ouroboros of accountability. What do you do when your own oppression is something you are, by virtue of living in the place that you do, something you are more or less forced into complicity toward? How does that contribute to the guilt the marginalized feel, especially when they're struggling to survive as it is? Of course, I don't think it's particularly helpful to get all woe is me about in the cases where some of us do undeniably hold privileges over others, but it is still something to be conscious of. It begs the question of what a better world could look like if it wasn't dictated by the inherently flawed systems we currently work under. Because, well, a system that marginalizes vulnerable people in the first place is one that I would say is not functioning. It's notable to me that regardless of the outcome, we're left at the end of Chapter 1 with ENA fragmenting, being swarmed with a growth of cubes until she is ultimately locked into a mound, straining to escape herself. A mannequin flies out of her and drifts through the same dark tunnel we saw back in Temptation's Stairway before landing back in the overworld and going back to normal. An easy escape is never possible. You may try to forget your past, but depending on what you've done, the past never forgets you. Once again, it seems someone's wishes cannot be granted. I think it's pretty safe to say that the mannequins are all potential ENAs of a sort at this point. Hell, you can even encounter another instance of this in the main Lonely Door area. A WinRAR reference of all things. You come across this bound collection of books on a literal compressor, and tightening it makes the size smaller and smaller. Eventually trying to squeeze it down beyond one book makes ENA black out and respawn, and when you return you find a scattering of colored cubes with a mannequin sticking out from them. That compression literally shattered ENA, and she was immediately replaced. It certainly is a grim portent if I've ever seen one. Oh god, there is so much to cover in this game. I feel like I'm unfortunately going to glaze past something on accident no matter what. I haven't even gotten to stuff like Tasky Maiden, miss rude entities like you get punished for the sins of others, or leaving the shop guy to die, or the hidden cave with the locked off doors, or the different purge event NPCs, or coral glasses. Oh, right, coral glasses. You wouldn't think this office woman with anxiety, who, to be clear, I am in love with, I would marry her, would actually be all that important, considering she gives you a fax number at the beginning of the game and basically doesn't show back up. But did you know that you can use your keyboard to call her? And through a variety of discoverable codes, can call plenty of other people too once you've figured that out. And that those calls tend to be references to other facets of the series, and they're very interesting. Of course, there's the regular one, the one where Coral Glasses herself picks up and talks about how out there Tasky Maiden is before telling her to go away, which Tasky herself interprets as a job that she acquires. But then there's also a call from Findall, the auctioneer from Auction Day, and even another hidden call with Froggy. All of them talk about work, actually. Findall says he's got a ton of interviews, the auctioneer admits he's probably scammed you if you're calling him, likely in reference to the hidden 3D dogs in the game, and Froggy saying that he doesn't really feel comfortable casually chatting with you until you both clock out. Again, ENA is pretty strained in the realm of personal connections, and all of these instances of rejection come hand in hand with the implication that time would be better served with a job. I guess then that it feels significant that the person ENA is seeking out to destroy is called the boss, which, yeah, is the catch-all term for a big enemy in a video game, but feels particularly striking here when put up against all of the other imagery revolving around labor in the workforce. The hope that there's one big bad guy in charge of the machine that can be taken down, but who knows if that's really where things are heading. I can't see it being that simple. Another NPC, Dahlia, seems to imply as much to me. You can only find her after wandering through a huge eerie maze located in the taxicab, which you can only access if you go into the cab before restoring its driver. She's the owner of the gift shop, herself a sort of decorated mannequin figure. She interchangeably calls ENA Little Fool, while her subtitles simply say ENA's name in its place, and she does not even barter with ENA a little bit on her extremely luxurious and unreachable prices. All of her products are extremely simple, but claim some sort of impossible ability, usually related to gaining respect, admiration, or whatever else. She's shockingly open about the fact that her products won't actually do this, though, but may cover these insecurities temporarily, and for a price. It's the kind of rare but perfectly believable glimpse behind a machine's curtain, seeing the very detached and casually cruel way those who spur it on are willing to lie to get what they want, telling insincere falsehoods, promising that they will improve people's self-worth, while creating the conditions under which their self-worths are indeed lost in the first place. Same as it always was. And hey, remember how I said that there are references to past entries here? Look no further than both outcomes leading you back to Auction Day, except Auction Day itself literally seems to be taking over the layout of Lonely Door, completely analogous to all of its placements, but also still an insincere and dull recreation of that original first video. What I mean when I say that is that it's literally being gentrified. Real estate agents flooding around boring houses, and this being the very area that fragments ENA in the first place. And who's off in the distance, on a landmass that you can't access no matter how far you try to jump? Dahlia. The distant and inaccessible watch as the common layperson, the othered and abused, falls into hell and they don't even bat an eye. This outcome, like I said, doesn't change at all, even if you do the failed ending, but the failed ending does contain some pretty interesting stuff with the genie's remains, like I said. She essentially questions your conviction, recognizing that you may not even know much about the boss personally, and implying that your dilly-dallying is a sign of hesitation towards your goal. I'm also particularly struck by the line she says when you first meet her. "My condolences on reaching this place. Whoever you are talking with now is what remains of the former genie of these lands. Forgiveness is only a gift you can never have." Forgiveness is only a gift you can never have.
This is probably one of the most relatable series out there when it comes to, like, series that try and go for, like, avant-garde or art house presentations, but it's kind of one of the most especially for our generation in particular, one of the most like basic themes you can find. I feel as though ENA is commentary on the societal ramifications of unchecked sensationalism.
Okay.
Specifically with the animations on YouTube, sensationalism within the scope of a sort of late-stage capitalist hellscape. And this is sort of presented in a number of different examples throughout the series. For example, with the very first, I guess, story-based animation auction day, there's an item, a very special item offered.
Right, the dog.
With the promise of making all the buyer's existential troubles go away. That was the specific wording of it. You see all these people sort of acting out. There's this sort of implied pressure that you kind of have to be a bit of an asshat, or at least cutthroat in your approach to getting what it is you're wanting, reaching that specific sense of fulfillment. There's a bit of that as well in Extinction Party, but not nearly as much. The main lesson in that is that Ina's trying to get to Mooney at the party itself to sort of present this gift, and there's this sort of implied like, oh, this better be a good gift for me.
It seems for the most part a lot of Mooney's interactions with her are very transactional, very like, what can you do for me? Other than that, she doesn't really seem to actually give Enna much of the time of day.
Absolutely, and I feel like that is most emphasized in Temptation Stairway, where the whole premise of it is that, okay, there's this giant walking temple called the Great Runus, and whoever makes it to the top gets one free wish. And of course, Mooney is inclined to make it, as you said, transactional. Like, whoever doesn't make it first has to pay the debts of the winner.
God, that is such a complicated thing to ask here, because Anna represents to me the inherent absurdity in our life. Like, we are forced to exist on this plane, and we experience such wild and radical things that happen to us at any given moment. We just have to live with it. We kind of have to find the good in it all. And I think part about that is Enna herself. What I've always really liked about Enna's design, but also just like as a whole, is like the two separate ends of Enna. It's always fun to try to like explore that facet of existence, because in that way you can interpret it as faces, you know, like you put on different faces for everything.
Right, like the difference between how you act with your friends, your customer service voice, your like
exactly.
Absolutely, that's literally it. It's the customer service voice. And then you see the blue side of Ina, which is very much prompted out, I find most often, when Mooney is involved, and that is like the unmistakable social anxiety, like leaking through the cracks, quite literally in some cases with Ina. It culminates in like the entity known as the therapist saying, yeah, this place probably isn't going to do anything for you, so you probably don't need to be here. And that sort of has this sort of backhanded as like, well, you're just not trying to have fun. Like, you're not looking for fun. What are you doing here anyway? There's something clearly wrong with you. And it's recontextualized when it's revealed at the end that it all stemmed from one instigated game of Ding Dong Dash, or whatever it is the kids are calling it these days. And again, it was coaxed by Mooney, saying like, no, you gotta do this thing, it'll be fun, I promise. That peer pressure, I feel, is a product of the type of society that develops from rampant sensationalism run amok.
And there's a really interesting difference here between Dream Barbecue Enna and the Enna of the animated series here, where like animated series Enna is so carefree. Like, it just kind of like goes on like funny romps, and they have deeper layers to them. But then we have Dream BBQ Enna, which is so goal oriented, so very driven as a person. And at the same time here, I think it's really fascinating that they're both Enna. Like, I think part of Lonely Door's exploration of Enna as a character is that like you have to find a balance to the way that you go about in the world. If you fall too hard into reality, you like there's just a portion of yourself that gets really lost in, I would almost say, despair. You know, I don't want to get Junko Enoshima here, but like genuinely looking at the world as it is, you will become inevitably depressed.
Right.
On the other hand, you can't be too like untethered from the world, otherwise you're just not real anymore. You do lose a portion of yourself on that front as well, and you just become almost nebulous. I
do think there is like an interesting thematic tension in ENA revolving around sort of the roles that we like play in society, especially when we are people who are very alienated from it.
It feels more like it is still a form of sensationalism, but it's more revolving around propaganda. From the other side of the customer service, we see the power to the proletariat approach, down to the fucking megaphone she's constantly holding as if she's at a workers' rights rally.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good point.
There are a lot of avenues you could take with the simple premise of you gotta do what you gotta do, but also, why the fuck am I doing this in the first place? What's the point? Am I simply another cog in the machine? And is that good or bad for me?
Yeah, the death imagery in Dream Barbecue is so fascinating, because like it's such an easy trope to be like, oh yeah, the main character is just dead. You know, This is coma theory. But ENA, I'm so on the fence here of if ENA Dream Barbecue is actually implying this, or if it's just interesting imagery that kind of goes along with the thematics of ENA.
It's like, it's very, like, you've heard the song Charlie's Inferno, right? I get a very similar vibe off of Dream Barbecue that I get off of that song.
I don't know. I think there is something really fascinating about once you transcend the mortal plane, or, you know, like when you pass on here, like things just get weird. You're no longer bound by reality. It's all like abstract.
It's like you said, it ultimately comes down to what the individual sees of themselves and their experiences in ENA.
What's in the briefcase?
Yeah.
And like your answer to that question, I think, has less to do with what you think actually is like, you know, what's the lore answer? Like, what do you think is the most likely thing to have been in there or whatever? Really, your answer says a lot more about like you than anything else, I think.
I like to think it's another Big Kahuna burger.
Well, I mean, one can only hope.
I also think there is a huge, interesting gender element to ENA about that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know we talked about like the idea of faces and how we present it to ourselves to other people, but like in this way. So I am by gender, I go by he and she pronouns, and in that way ENA it kind of fucking rules, because there is both very masculine and feminine traits to each ENA. I mean, both vocally, but also like just in the way they both perform. I think I see that in ENA myself, but also just like I do also try to like keep myself both half grounded and half like joyful, despite the horrors we stay silly. Like that's a very core ENA philosophy, but it also resonates with me. We're living in very scary times, and in that way, I want to keep myself a little bit silly. It's not that I have to, but I want to.
You sort of have to have that yellow or red half of the mask on at all times, but also understand that like some of the other half still has to leak out for the sake of expressing that you're still human, especially depending on the type of job you have or the social circles you run in. That in and of itself is even more valuable than having a full customer service mask or a full gotta do what you gotta do mask. I'm nearly 36 years old. I still play Pokemon. I still watch Godzilla movies. And you know what? It sucks sometimes, but at least I know who the hell I am.
As I think has already been well demonstrated throughout this video, I don't think there is a right way to interpret ENA. Half of the fun of the series is seeing what these things can mean to people, which happen to seem vastly different sometimes depending on that person's experiences. But what I will say is that I certainly see myself in her. I think if ever you've been outcasted on the basis of something immutable about you, you've also known what it's like to be like ENA, to be a discarded mannequin in a world that does not seem to want to understand you. It is precisely the ENA series' eclectic absurdity which underscores its most resonant and defining artistic takeaway, that happiness is often sacrificed at the altar of conformity, and that true freedom, true self-love and acknowledgement is fought bitterly for, and won, by virtue of getting a little freaky with it. Hi, thanks for watching my funny ENA video. I'm sorry this took a million years to put out, but unfortunately when you have debilitating mental illness and also you are struggling to decide what to do with your life, it can be a little bit difficult to work up the inspiration to make funny YouTube video. But both fortunately and unfortunately for me, I have to do that in order to eat and live. So, yeah. If you would like to help me eat and live a little bit more comfortably, I have a Patreon, which you can check out to get cool rewards, like getting into my members-only Discord server. Or you can donate one time on Ko-fi. Or you can become a channel member, which gets you cool emojis to use in my stream chats. Which, by the way, I stream every week. I stream twice a week. We play a bunch of games. Visual novels, horror games, and yes, lots of blind Ace Attorney. If you've ever wanted to see my reactions to the Ace Attorney entries that I haven't played yet, I've been doing Spirit of Justice recently, because I finished Dual Destinies a while back. And yes, I am going to be making videos about those games at some point, but I have to actually play them for the first time first, you know how it is. Also, you should probably subscribe and comment if you like the video. I've been told to say this by a scary man that's standing just out of your eye line that is pointing a cartoonishly large gun at me. His name is John Google. Okay, enough of that bullshit. Here's the patron crawl. If you hear your name here, you support me, and you're beautiful and I love you. Cyberlink420, Serena Midori, ShogunDX, Friend of Dracula, Claire, Ali Oliver, Claire Meeboon, Bailey, Noelle Hadley, Joseph Adams, Wecon, MJL, Lord Omega 12, Stage Lights, White Toast, Hollow Transient, Lay Fam, T, Saxon, 16 Crows in a Trenchcoat, Indigo, Horsefry, CJ the Magic Goose, Niche Fish, JS, Phantom Falcon, Sad Boy Alert, Space Battery, Moiba Alsue, Big Yellow, Digimaniac 33, Sable Cowl, Elaine Allfelt, Queen Elzyme, Deviant Witch, Zero Enderborn, Clivercool, George, Noah, Matthew Irwin, Luna, Jane Yarley, Matt Hop, Jeff Ladd, Torterra454, Seditious, JunePop45, Spinderace, Jordan Finch, Kev Worst, IVP, and Jedi Real. Thank you so much for watching as always. I will see you in the next one, whatever the hell that is. I'm starting preliminary work on a big Ace Attorney video again, but I won't promise when that will happen. I'm just telling you that it is happening. We'll see, we'll see. There's a lot of things I want to make, dog. But anyway, I'll see you later. Thank you for watching. Bye.